The MLB season is finally back, and baseball's getting started a little bit differently this year. We're starting with a two-game series between the Padres and the Dodgers, played in Korea to kick the season off. And we, of course, have two showdown slates here to get things started for the MLB DFS season. My name's Jordan Chan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim, and I wanted to record a quick video walking through how I'm going to be attacking these two showdown slates, give you some ideas about how to put together your strategy for building winning MLB showdown lineups on SaberSim this year. Now, we, of course, do have other MLB showdown strategy videos from last season available in our YouTube channel here. I'll link those in the description to check those out. This slate in particular, these two slates, does offer up a little bit of different strategies than I think we might normally get with MLB Showdown. So I want to talk about some of the things that make these games in particular unique, as well as just walk through my general strategy for building winning MLB DFS lineups on SaberSim. So to get things started, I'm going to start with the basic process, what I do to get my lineups rolling here, then talk about a few of the specific edges that I think these slates provide here. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get my entries file uploaded into SaberSim here. So we'll download the template file from DraftKings and just drag and drop it here. I'm dropping 50 entries into the $1 mini max here. There are not massive contests here for these particular slates. The mini-max about 53.50. Flagship actually a little bit smaller than that, 10K to first here. So not enormous contests, but good contests to get us started here. I'm going to set up my contest sim now so I have my settings ready to roll. Then jump back over to the build screen. And for my first builds here, I'm going to go ahead and just get things started with a pretty basic build here. I'm going to make the two changes to DraftKings projections. I just want to get a sense of what these lineups are looking like here. Set up my 50 lineups, and I'm going to expand this up to 5,000 to build out a nice large pool for myself here and go ahead and get these lineups building. So this will take a minute for SaberSim to run this here, but we'll go ahead and let this build. What SaberSim is doing at this particular step is it is simulating out this game 5,000 different times, giving me the best GPP lineup possible that you could score, the highest scoring lineups for each of those individual simulations. So we're going to have this big pool of lineups to work with. We'll be able to sort and review and identify the best possible ones to play. But what makes SaberSim so powerful for MLB Showdown in particular is that these are not just based on the average projections. These are based on single slate optimals. Average projections, especially for a sport like baseball, is going to always overwhelmingly favor players projected to do very well on average, players that are projected to have very high point totals on average. But in baseball, players have very wide ranges of outcomes, very large distributions here, and average projections are going to do a pretty poor job of correctly picking up on a player's true downside and upside potential. So when we're using the simulations to build our lineups here, we're getting to take advantage of what the true range of outcomes of a guy like Ohtani actually looks like here on this slate, as well as the downside of individual pitchers, just a much better image of what winning lineups could actually look like here. So we'll give SaberSim just another minute to finish up this build here and then keep going from there. All right, so our lineups are now complete. We've got this pool of 5,000 single simulation optimals to work with. By default, our lineups are going to be sorted by our single game Saber score here. So what this is going to do, if we expand this and take a look at that single game, this is going to look at how often a lineup is optimal in our simulations, as well as the projection and the ownership of our lineup to identify the best possible lineups from our pool to play here. And this is a great start. If you're not on the SaberSim Ultimate plan and you don't have contest sims at your disposal, this is going to be a great way to identify what some of the top lineups in your pool look like. But if you are on Ultimate, and I highly recommend if you're interested in really diving into MLB Showdown this season to check out the contest sims tool with Ultimate, we're going to be able to actually identify what are exactly the most profitable lineups in our pool by running a contest sim here, comparing each of these lineups in the 5,000 into what we expect the field to play in this contest and see how they perform if that contest plays out over and over again here. So I've already configured my contest sim from when I uploaded my entries file. So now what I'm going to do is run my contest sim. And again, it's taking each lineup of the 5,000, plugging it into what we expect the minimax field to look like using the payout structure of that contest and seeing how it performs over 100,000 iterations of this contest. Okay, now that our contest sim is finished here, you can see some of the lineups here at the top did have positive ROIs. These are profitable lineups. But if we shift over to using the actual best ROI lineups from our contest sim, we make a big jump and do a little bit of a better job identifying the top lineups from our pool, pulling out some of those elite lineups here from the pool. So now it's time to review our pool. Let's take a look and see what we got here. We can take a look at our top exposures to our captains and our utility, and we are going to see very quickly a very heavy Padres approach in this particular build here. And that does make sense. You'll see contest sims tend to lean this direction when there is a team that is a heavy favorite that we have in this particular situation. The contest sims vastly prefer to stack up the opposite team, root for an upset, particularly root for an upset by a large margin, because so much of the field and so much of people building with average projections are going to overwhelmingly be favoring Dodgers in their lineup. So building into a lot of Padres stacks is something that's going to show up in a lot of the top ROI lineups from the contest sim. If you've watched my MLB Showdown videos before in the past, I am totally in on this. I embrace this kind of approach in most of my builds here. I like to generally fade what the spread is saying about the game, what I think most people are going to do about the game, and take a little bit of a different direction. But let's dive into what makes this particular game unique, because this is a little bit of a different showdown here. There's a couple things going on that we're not going to get in most of our typical MLB showdowns that we're going to play most of the season here. The first is the game start time, which I think is probably going to be the single biggest edge that you can get on this particular slate. This game locks at 4:05 a.m. Mountain Time, where I am here in my local time zone, which means most likely, at least at the time of this recording here, we are not going to have confirmed starting lineups for this game. By the time most people are going to be building their lineups, it will take you waking up in the middle of the night or staying up for those starting lineups to see who's actually starting and where. And there is going to be a change to projections, of course, as that information actually comes out. I think the most important thing that you can do if you're serious about maximizing your profit on this slate and looking for an edge here is making yourself available to react to those changing starting lineups when the new sims run, rebuilding your lineups, rerunning your contest sims to account for who's actually playing in this game. But we can actually probably go one step further than that, and I think there is an opportunity to exploit what the biggest mistakes most people are going to make with their lineups actually are here. What I mean specifically there is what players were projected to potentially be in the lineup that are no longer in the lineup here. You're obviously going to fade them if their projection goes to 0. You're obviously getting some advantage there. But players that were not expected to be in the lineup here, if there are any players that weren't expected to be in the lineup at all, and then they are in the lineup, I will want to be well over the field on those particular players. The ownership projections and the field lineups that the contest sims are using here are likely to overstate the actual ownership of those types of players because they're assuming a rational field, a field that's acting totally normal. But that's not what we're actually going to have here. We're going to probably have a decent portion of the field, especially at the lower stakes, that do not update and do not react in time to these confirmed starting lineups, especially if we get something very different than expected here. So if some random player here ends up being in the field, let's see, if we get word that Chris Taylor is getting a start here or something like that, any of these hitters that are on the roster here that just are not in the expected starting lineup right now get into the field. Let's say the ownership was 10% expected on this particular player. It's probably going to be actually quite a bit lower than that because there's going to be a bunch of people that didn't correctly adjust to that information. And on that note, I think it's actually worth going through and looking around, especially if you have access to other projection models or other tools, to see what people are projecting to be the starting lineups of these different teams. If there is a particular projection model out there that is expecting Chris Taylor to be in the lineup, just as an example here, and he actually is, there's a little bit less of an advantage of getting there because some people using that model may have already had him in their lineups. So figuring out basically what is the general consensus of projected lineups here, and then how does that change when the starting lineups come out, can be probably a pretty big edge to exploit here in terms of figuring out where you want your exposure to go. Now, I do think that is probably our single biggest edge opportunity on this slate, is reacting to the actual starting lineups when they come out overnight. There are a couple other things that I'm aware of here and that I'm going to be doing in my process here, just based on the particular dynamics of this game. The first is that these are the very first games of the season here. I don't think that the teams are going to really push their starting pitchers and leave them out there for a long time, even if they're pitching very well. I think the upside of either of these two pitchers on both games are likely to be a little capped, especially on this first game. We've got Yu Darvish here and Tyler Glasnow expected to pitch. Both pitchers that have had injury troubles in the past couple years. I really don't think that the managers are going to push these guys at all. Starting pitchers are always very popular, even on the underdog team here in the captain spot and the flex, just because they project so well on average. So I will likely be trying to take a stand on both of these guys. At the moment here, I'm already off glass now because the build is so heavily Padres focused, but I also am probably going to look at least at being well under the field or potentially just considering a full Yu Darvish at captain fade here. Again, just because I think that upside there is a little capped. I don't expect these guys to pitch for, I would be even surprised if they went above 6 innings, either of them. So I think that caps the upside a little bit there. I think it could even be a little bit lower than that. That's just a stand that I'm taking here. I do think taking some sort of stand based on your research or your intuition here can be useful just to do something a little bit different on this slate. Now, one thing that is really cool about the contest sims and SaberSim Ultimate is you do have a very viable way of checking your work on that. What you can do here, so I am sorting by the top ROI lineups and I've eliminated Yu Darvish from my pool. I can also go ahead here and set a filter to filter out any lineups that are not profitable. So I can say only show me lineups where the ROI is greater than 0. And this is going to trash a little about 40% of my pool here. But what I can do now is verify that all of my lineups that I have selected here, the ones where I've removed Yu Darvish completely from my pool, are still profitable. So I can check my 50th lineup in my pool is actually still just lineup 88 out of 2890 here. It has an expected ROI of 329.7. So I know that this stand that I'm taking that does seem pretty aggressive, that seems like a big stand here, is still likely to be a profitable one here. I'm not throwing a shot in the dark to fade Yu Darvish at captain here. I have an educated reason to believe why I think that upside might be capped a little bit there. And then I can test that using the contest sims here to verify that stand makes sense. Now, if I wanted to take this one step further and push it here, at least just to experiment, I could try fading Yu Darvish here at flex as well, who is now popping into 100% of my lineups in the flex spot here. I am just curious to see what this does here to my builds if I were to just take a very aggressive approach here with these guys. I'm also gonna fade glass at captain and flex. I'm just curious, really just stress testing how far I can push the contest sims and still get profitable lineups on the other side here. Let's see, let's sort. Let's just X both pitchers out completely here and see what kind of lineups we're getting. So I'm now fading both pitchers totally at captain and flex here. And again, if I scroll down here and take a look at my lowest lineups here. So I'm at lineup 462 out of 2890. I still have a profitable ROI. This actually might be a direction that I'm okay taking here. I think this is an interesting approach here of fading both of these guys. I think they are going to be very popular. I think that upside is capped a little bit. It does not take a lot for a single hitter to outscore in raw points a pitcher, especially a pitcher that is likely to, I don't think, go very far into these games here. So this might be a direction that I end up actually taking here in my builds. I like this approach here. So what we've done is we have run the contest sim here. We're on the underdog side of this game, and we're fading both pitchers that I think might have a little bit of limited upside, given that it's the first game of the season. Now, the one other thing you may want to spend some time looking into here is your exposure to relief pitchers. You are likely to see some relief pitchers here pop up into your build. I was getting quite a bit more when we were jamming some of the starting pitchers in there because they are such good salary relief. If you've watched my MLB Showdown videos before, know that I generally like to play relief pitchers in the utility spot here. I think they are a way to get a unique lineup. I think they are generally underrated by the field, but it does require a little bit of cross-checking here to make sure that you're comfortable with the relief pitchers that you're getting. During the regular season, what I typically do once we get a sense of what the bullpens are really going to look like is see who pitched recently, particularly did anybody pitch the day prior, and remove those relief pitchers from your build. In this case, we don't really have the luxury of having had a day prior or even any history of the bullpens for this year. So it could be a little bit tricky to know exactly what to do here. I think this is a good opportunity to do a little bit of research, particularly looking into the bullpens of either of these teams. If you think there is a reliever that is more likely to see playing time than any of the other pitchers in the bullpen, increasing your exposure to those guys or bumping up the projection can be a good approach, or vice versa. If you are getting a lot of exposure to your relief pitchers in general for these games, they are players that I would take a second look at here and at least validate that they have a decent chance to get into the game. You're always taking some risk with a relief pitcher because they're not starting. They're not guaranteed to get playing time, but it can be a good way to get unique. And they are definitely going to get into this game, at least if you're in agreement with me that these starting pitchers here are likely to not go very far. Somebody's got to close the game out here. So I think they can be an interesting direction, but probably worth spending a little bit of time looking at your highest exposed relief pitchers and making sure that you're comfortable with the names there and that you think that they're viable players to get some game action in for these particular slates. Where I'm at in my particular build, I'm just left with a single Wandy Peralta lineup here because of the direction that I've taken with my build. I'm probably just going to X him out here because I don't really need him here. And I don't know if he's particularly likely to get in the game. So I'm just going to X out here. I'm playing a direction of this slate where the Padres win, and this is probably a high-scoring affair at this point. But the contest sims tell me that this is a viable approach for the slate, so this is probably what I'm going to run with here with my particular build. Now, of course, the big thing to do is to make sure that we check back for those starting lineup. I'm going to be setting an alarm here to make sure that I get starters playing in this game here, rebuild my lineups accordingly if not, and making sure that I'm playing these starters because that is going to be the single biggest edge you're going to get. My fingers are crossed that we do get a slightly different starting lineup than expected, I think. Even if it's towards the end of the lineup, somebody batting 7, 8, or 9, maybe a hitter that doesn't have a great average projection when the dust settles, I'm still going to be pretty excited to get a lot of exposure there, just because the player's probably going to be vastly underowned. And vice versa, whoever that player replaces in the expected starting lineup is going to just kill a few lineups right off the bat. But that's a pretty complete picture of what my process would look like for these slates, with the things that I'm thinking about here, how I'm going to be attacking these particular slates. I think this is a pretty fun way to start the season. All that's left here for me to do now is to go ahead and save this to my contest here to get these filled into the Minimax. We'll download the selected entries here, and I can go ahead and get these uploaded into DraftKings, so I'm ready to roll here. Now, this is, of course, just the start of the MLB season. We are going to be coming out with a bunch of other MLB DFS strategy videos here over the course of the next few weeks as MLB season heats up. I just wanted to get a quick video out for you guys today to talk a little bit about what I think is important for these slates here taking place in Korea this week, a few things to keep an eye on as you're building your lineup. So if you have any other questions or comments, you can always reach out in our Discord server or by emailing us at support@sabersim.com, or of course, dropping your comment beneath this video here. Enjoy these opening series slates that we're getting here to start the season off, and we'll see you next time.